Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido and today is the Cinnabar Blazes going up against the Petalburg Razors as both these sides are trying to maintain a strong hold in the top 5. Let's have a look at this tale of the tape as the Blazers, currently sitting in second place, want the victory here to try and get themselves up into that top position, but the Razors, coming off a clean sweep defeat, need to bounce back big if they want to move back up to the top of the leaderboard. So with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the fire decks? Will it be the colorless decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And having flipped heads and going first, it's the Flamathon deck from the Cinnabar Blazes, moving that Paldean Taurus into the active spot. It's the Regigigas from the Hall of Origin deck for the Petalburg Razors going into their active spot, and we haven't actually seen Regigigas do that much this season. We'll see if it can do that here today, but it is the Pokemon Center Lady being pulled for the Blazers. We can see the Rapidash they've got in hand. Now they don't have a Pokeball, so they can't get another basic Pokemon, but they have that time because Regigigas does require 4 energy, but they've got their own Pokeball, so they are going to play that, and they do get the Porygon. And we can see that they've got that Porygon Z in hand, so they do need that Porygon 2, but they do get a first energy here onto Regigigas, trying to set up that Raging Hammer. The Blazers now pulling the potion, and still no basic Pokemon, so they are going to play that Iono. They're going to shuffle their hand into their deck, also making the Razors have to do the same, and they are going to get the X Speed. First is Research, they get a Ponyta and a second Paldean Taurus, as well as that Giant Cape. Now they can't play the Professor's Research because they just played a supporter card, but they do move that Ponyta onto the bench. And they do get a first energy onto the Taurus, keeping that second Taurus in hand as the Razors. They've now got their second Porygon, but they've also got a Porygon Z still in hand and that Celestic Town Elder. They are going to play the Giant Cape they just pulled, as well as having that Dawn. Now, keeping in mind that Raging Hammer does do 50 damage, but it also does additional damage equal to the damage that Regigigas has taken. And I just may have said damage way too many times as the Blazers pull their second Houndoom. Pull their first Houndoom. They've already got their second Taurus, but they play their Professor's Research, getting out the potion, getting their second Professor's Research as well. Not producing too many Pokemon yet so far from their Flamathon deck, but they do get a second energy onto Taurus, as it's the Arceus from the Hall of Origin deck being pulled, and they immediately move that onto the bench. It also requires 4 energy to get online, but we do see Regigigas getting its third energy. One more turn and it can go on the offensive as the Houndour are now being pulled for the Blazers. No one having done any damage yet in this game 1 of this best of 3 series. The Professor's Research once again played by the Blazers. They get their second Houndoom. This time that is correct, but they also get the Rapidash. As we always like to say, regardless of the outcome of these first 2 games, that third matchup still counts toward our leaderboard, trying to get as much damage and as many points in this series as possible, as it does count towards that leaderboard. And the Blazers do get a third energy onto the Taurus. They're having to look through their hand. Now the Rapidash does only require 1 energy. There is a second Rapidash in this deck from the Mythical Island set that requires 2 energy, so they're thinking about how they want to approach this. You have to wonder, are they going to go on the offensive? Because Regigigas can go on the offensive on the next turn, and they do not want Regigigas to take Taurus off the board yet, as it is the Bidoof being pulled for the Razors. The Regigigas does get its 4th energy. It's only going to do 50 damage because it hasn't taken any damage, and there is that Raging Hammer. The first time I believe we've seen that from Regigigas this season of the PokeType League TCG. Now the Blazers have pulled a Pokeball. They're going to get another basic Pokemon. It is their second Ponyta now in hand. And they're thinking about how they want to approach this. They are going to get one of those Houndoom online with that corner. It also requires 2 energy, and they do get a first onto it as well. Continuing to look through their hand, and they're going with the Blaze Tackle. They're not using a Giant Cape or a Potion because they know after doing that 80 damage to Regigigas, it will be able to take out that Taurus with the additional damage from that Raging Hammer, because it is now capable of doing 130 damage. The Blazers need to get that Regigigas off the table, as still neither side has taken a point yet. The Bibarel was just pulled for the Razors, and here is that Raging Hammer coming down. It brings the hammer down onto the Taurus and gets the first point for the Razors. Both these sides have had a strong start to the season, so it's really interesting to see who can come out on top in this series, with hopes of winning PokeType League TCG Season A2, but they do move the Ponyta into the active spot. Do the Blazers? They're well aware that the Houndoom cannot do enough to take out the Regigigas. They do move their second Houndour onto the bench. They are going to move the Rapidash as well. Now the Rapidash can do 40 damage with this Fire Main, and only requires the 1 energy that they do get onto it. They're trying to chip away at the Regigigas here. This is a big task for this Flameathon deck right now. And Regigigas with only 40 health remaining. The Razors do pull their Rocky Helmet. Now there is already a Pokemon tool onto the Regigigas. The Bibarel is now online. Now it looks like Arceus, no. They're hovering over the Bibarel. Very interesting. We haven't seen that so far this season. As the Porygon already has a single energy, the Arceus getting its first energy, and they've got that Dawn in hand that could be very useful if they want to change where an energy is. But that Raging Hammer, 170 damage. It just keeps getting stronger, and it wipes the Rapidash off the board. The Razors only need 1 more point in this game 1 to take this series. And I said series, but I do mean game. There's been a lot of games so far this round, as there is every round. 5 games a week here, as that Houndoom is now online, and the Ponytail also online for the Blazers. But it is that active Houndoom getting its second energy. It's also going to get a Giant Cape, taking its health up to 120. But now they can get this Regigigas off the board and try to bring this game 1 back before we hit our game 2. And with that corner, Regigigas has finally been taken out. A full team effort from the Cinnabar Blazes to do so. But we saw it take give 170 damage with that Raging Hammer, as the Razors are thinking about how they want to approach this next turn. And they're moving the Bibarel into the active spot, as the Porygon 2 has been drawn for the Razors immediately coming online. They do have that Porygon Z in hand, and they are going to go with setting up the Porygon Z, it looks, because that Porygon 2 does get a second energy. The Rocky Helmet being put on to the Bibarel. Now that corner from the Houndoom will make it so Bibarel cannot retreat in the next turn. But there's not much the Razors can do. They can afford to take another point, though, as they have 2. The Blazers so far only have 1 point, and Ponytail getting its first energy. The Blazers taking their time with this decision. They go for the corner. 60 damage onto that Bibarel, leaving it with 50 health, but it can no longer retreat. That Rocky Helmet does do 20 damage in return to the Houndoom, as the Razors do pull their Pokemon Center Lady. They can actually use this on the Bibarel if they want to buy themselves more time, but this could also afford the time the Blazers, the time to the Blazers to get their second Rapidash in hand. The Razors getting a second energy onto the Arceus, as that Porygon Z is now online, and they do play that Pokemon Center Lady, so Bibarel now has 80 health remaining. And they are buying themselves an extra bit of time, keeping Bibarel in that active spot. And there is that Rapidash with the Rising Lunge. It's capable of doing 100 damage here, as the Blazers do immediately get that online, and they're thinking about how they want to approach this next turn. They get an energy onto the Houndoom, trying to give themselves options on what they may want to choose, and they are going to restore the health of Houndoom as well back to full strength. 120 with that Giant Cape, and another corner, bringing Bibarel down to only 20 health. That Rocky Helmet immediately takes 20 damage back away from Houndoom, as the Razors pull their Professor's Research now in the later stages of this game 1, and they are going to play it, so they do get an additional 2 cards from their deck. Second Porygon Z, second Bibarel. Neither of them can come online, but they do have that Porygon in hand, as Arceus is going to get its third energy. It requires 1 more energy if it wants to hit that Power Blast that does 100 damage. The potion once again being pulled for the Blazers. They can use this onto Houndoom, but it will immediately just take damage from that Rocky Helmet. They're taking their time to think about how they want to approach this. They still have a Pokemon Center Lady in hand, but they're setting up the Tauros, who's now online as well, getting its first of 3 required energy. Here comes another corner from the Houndoom. It will take the Bibarel off the board, getting the second point for the Blazers, which is fantastic for them, but it's even better for the Razors. The Blazers and the Razors sound very similar whilst I say them between this match. Hopefully I don't get them mixed up either. But now the Razors are in full control. They can move either Porygon or Arceus into the active spot. They will surely want to go with Arceus if they want to maximize their damage, but clearly that's not what they're thinking of here. Instead, they're going with the Porygon Z, a very interesting decision. Porygon Z will still get the elimination. I don't know if they've considered, they've got the win condition right here, but regardless, they have not maximized their damage, but they still take game 1 with that Buggy Beam. And we didn't get to see the Porygon Z Chaos in this matchup, but regardless, the Razors take game 1. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. All of this helps out the channel as we look to make this series grow. And as we go into game 2, the Razors do flip heads and they're going with their Bombardment deck. And we can see both Snorlax in hand, plus that Pokeball. The Blazers going with their Flint Lockwood deck, and we can see the Heat Rotom plus the Slugma. We'll see if the Heat Rotom can cook up anything that would be interesting for Snorlax, as it's the Slugma going into the active spot and the Heat Rotom going onto the bench. But here we go, game 2 as the Razors look to lock the series up with this one. The Blazers hoping to take it to a game 3. And Apom has been pulled for the Razors, but before they put it down, they're going to play the Pokeball. They do have the the Lopunny in hand, but they do pull the Baneri, and they are immediately going to move that onto the bench as well as the Apom. Fortunately for this Bombardment deck, they only require 1 energy, whereas the Snorlax requires 4. And is the Sizzlipede pulled for the Blazers? They've already got a Center Scorch in hand. Now, the Center Scorch can do 130 damage, which is still not enough to take down a Snorlax, but they can start chipping away at its health, putting it into elimination range. There's the Flare doing 20 damage to the Snorlax. And already the Razors pulling the Ambipom, so immediately the Ambipom and the Baneri can come online. Now, they may not play the Lopunny, which I believe I just called the Baneri, as with the Lopunny, there are 2 variations of the Lopunny in this deck. One does do 30 damage, but one can also target the bench, as they are going to get a first energy onto the benched Snorlax. They're willing to let that other Snorlax sit in the active spot as the second Slugma is pulled for the Cinnabar Blazes, who are starting to set up their Center Scorch that is now online, getting its first energy as well. And the Flare is just going to continue to chip away at this Snorlax. And speaking of Flare, there is the Larvarage Flare, our Fire-type team in the PokeType League VGC over on our second channel, as there is the Rocky Helmet being placed onto that active Snorlax, so they're hoping to return that 20 damage to the Slugma every time it targets that active Snorlax, the bench Snorlax getting its second energy. And we see that second energy also going onto the Center Scorch. It needs 2 more though, as there's the 20 damage onto the Snorlax, and the Rocky Helmet does return that 20 damage onto the Slugma. Comes back over to the Petalburg Razors, and they get their Barry. Now, if they'd already had an energy onto Snorlax, they could have gotten a second energy on it and played the Barry, because Barry does reduce the energy cost for Snorlax by 2, but instead they're just going to continue setting up that benched Snorlax in the meantime. As the Blazers do pull their second Center Scorch, they get a third energy onto the benched Center Scorch. Now, looking at their hand, there's not a great deal much else they can do at the moment, but they are going to go with the Flare, once again chipping away. Snorlax being brought down to 60 health, but Slugma now being brought down to 30 health in return. And the Razors do pull their Giant Cape. They can't put it on the active Snorlax, but they get a first energy onto that said active Snorlax. Very interesting, they may end up going with that Barry in one of the coming turns, but in the meantime they send it back over to the Blazers, who do pull their Dawn card. It can move an energy from the bench to the active Pokemon. That is the use of that supporter card. And they think of playing their X-Speed. They're thinking of bringing that Center Scorch into the active spot, and even if it takes 20 damage, it can actually outlast a hit from the Snorlax. They bring the Slugma, retreating it to the bench. They can get a 4th energy onto the Center Scorch, and with a Fire Blast, they will have to discard an energy, but they're also going to put the Rocky Helmet onto it as well. A very clever play, because it can then return 20 damage to any Pokemon who attacks it. And with this Fire Blast, it wipes the Snorlax off the board. And there's that 20 damage, bringing the Snorlax down to 110 health, which means it can outlast a collapse from the Snorlax, as the Razors have their options on what they may want to move, because all of their Pokemon at the moment only require 1 energy, and they're going with the Ambipom, hoping to chip away with that double hit. It is a 2 coin flip move for each heads that does do 40 damage. The Razors are also going to play their Team Rocket Grunt, very clever, hoping to get the energy off of the Center Scorch. They require heads, and as soon as it gets the tails, which is the first one, they stop the coin flip, so Center Scorch still has 3 energy on it, but the double hit, they need to connect with these. And they get 1. They get 2. It's going to do 80 damage to the Center Scorch. This is fantastic for the Razors, because it does make Center Scorch, who is an absolute powerhouse, an easy target for this Bombardment deck. The Professor's research being pulled for the Blazers. They need to think about how they want to approach this. And they do get the Makago. They also get their second Sizzlipede, and they do have that second Center Scorch in hand. The Makago is now online. Now looking at their hand, they're thinking of moving the second Slugma onto the bench instead of the second Sizzlipede. They don't want to try and set up a second Fire Blast Center Scorch, but they are going to take this Ambipom off the board with this Fire Blast, getting their second point. The Razors still yet to take a point in this game too. This is fantastic for the Blazers, aiming to take it to a game 3. Let's keep in mind that the Blazers currently sit in second on the leaderboard, the Razors in fourth, so they're both in top 5 positions as they look to make it into Victory Road. The second Baneri has been pulled for the Razors, immediately going onto the bench, and the Giant Cape on to the Snorlax, who does only require 1 more energy. They can save that barrier. Not that it overly makes a difference because they've already lost their other Snorlax, but that Lopunny is now online, and the Collapse is going to take the Center Scorch off the board. The Blazers need Snorlax to stay asleep, as that is what happens when it uses that Collapse. It does fall asleep. There's 20 damage being done to it thanks to that Rocky Helmet. But the Razors have taken their first point as they're trying to turn this game to around completely. The Slugma has been put in the active spot for the Blazers, but the Razors, they flip the heads, which means Snorlax is awake. The Giant Cape has been pulled for the Blazers, and they are going to get that onto the Makago that will take its health up to 100. It's already taken some damage in this matchup. Having a look between the Heat Rotom and the Makago, with that Searing Flame, Makago can burn the opposing Pokemon, but the Heat Rotom has the potential to do 60 damage to the opposing Pokemon based on a coin flip, so they're going to set up the Heat Rotom here, getting a first of 2 energy required onto it. They do also play that potion onto the Makago. They are going to get that Giant Cape onto it. Let's keep in mind they kind of have an option here with where they use their energy thanks to that Dawn, but now that second Sizzlipede is coming online, it is going to take that last bench position. They send it back over to the Razors. Remember, Snorlax has awoken, so it can immediately go for this Collapse once again. The Lopunny getting its first energy after the Fan Rotom has been pulled, and here it is, the Collapse to squish this Slugma card, and it is off the board. That's the second point for the Razors. The next point could decide this game. The Razors want it to win. The Blazers want it to continue. We will see how this unfolds as we continue this action. The Blazers need to determine who they want to move into the active spot. They are going with the Makago, but that coin flip to determine if Snorlax wakes up, and it's a Tails. It is still asleep. They will get a second opportunity before it comes back to them. The Blazers pulling their Pokeball. Immediately play that to get the second Rotom out of their deck, thinning the deck quite a bit as Makago gets its first of 2 required energy, but thanks to the Dawn they can move the energy from the Heat Rotom onto the Makago, and with this Searing Flame it will do 30 damage. It will leave the burn onto Snorlax that does do 20 damage in between turns, so there it is. It's also got that sleeping to contend with, as well as they're going to try and heal from the burn. They're unsuccessful. They get the tails. They're trying to wake up. Now, with another coin flip, they get the heads. That is what they need. That is fantastic for them. This could buy them the opportunity they need. The Razors do pull their Professor's Research. They play that immediately, getting another 2 cards out of this deck. They get the second Professor's Research. They get the second Lopunny, who is now online as well. And every Pokemon they have online is set up as they need that Collapse. 100 damage to the Makago, but there's that 20 damage to the Snorlax. It needs to heal from the burn. They get the head, so it's healed from the burn, but Makago can immediately put that back in its place. But it's awoken as well. They flip heads for both status conditions. The Blazers need something. They've just pulled their Makago. This is not good. The Razors are in control as they look to take this game too. The Center Scorch is coming online for the Blazers. They need to think about how they're going to approach this. It does take 3 energy to retreat the Makago. We're starting to wonder if they can see a win condition or a way out of this at all. They get an energy onto the Center Scorch. They can't retreat the Makago. They're going for the Searing Flame. It does get that burn back onto the Snorlax. Snorlax has 20 health remaining. They go for the coin flip. They get the tails, but that doesn't matter because Snorlax can wipe this Makago off the board, and it should happen before that burn can take it out. Although I have to question if the Razors are 100% sure on that. They do play their Professor's Research. They get their last 2 cards, the Apom and the Fan Rotom. They can go for the collapse, and this is exactly what they're doing. 100 damage, and Makago is taken off the board. And the Razors, with this bombardment deck, have taken the series, but we will still be going to our game 3 to add points and damage to the leaderboard, so both these sides still need to bring their best efforts. And it is going to be the Blazers going first with their Fire Spit Island deck. They do move the Magma into the active spot, their only basic Pokemon. It is a Chatot from the Razors Fast Days deck going into the active spot, plus the Jigglypuff and Chatot on the bench. But here we go, our game 3. The Razors looking to take a clean sweep. The Blazers looking to get one back as they pull their Professor's Research. They've also got the Pokeball, so they will guarantee themselves a basic Pokemon. And it is going to be the second Magma being pulled. They have the Flare Magma in the active spot. It is the Stoke Magma in hand, but the Professor's Research provides the Heatran plus the Pokemon Communication. They have a Ninetales in hand as well. They are going to play that Pokemon Communication, and it's interesting to see they are going with the Ninetales back into the deck, and it does shuffle, providing a Vulpix in return. Have to wonder if that's what they were after, or if they were hoping for a Magmortar. And they are going to send it over to the Razors, who do pull their Staraptor. They've got that Wigglytuff in hand with that Comforting Song, but no evolutions can happen yet. They are going for this Fury attack. 3 coin flips. For every heads, 20 damage. They get 1. They get 2. They get 40 damage onto this Magma already, bringing its health down to 30. This is a fantastic start for the Razors, as they are looking to take this clean sweep after they just suffered a clean sweep defeat. The Blazers pull their second Pokemon Communication, and they are going to play that immediately, which means they're sending that Vulpix back into their deck. Let's hope they don't get a Ninetales. And it is a Ninetales. Okay, I should not have said anything. That was terrible for them. The Commentator's Curse coming into play as the Magma does get its first energy here, going for the Flare. And it does do 20 damage to the Chatot. They desperately need those coin flips to go their way as the Razors pull the Staravia. Still no Starly in hand, but there is that Wigglytuff online with the Comforting Song, getting its first of 2 required energy, restoring the 20 health from the Chatot that it just lost. And these Fury attacks continue. They need 2. They've got 1. They've got 2. They get all 3. They get 60 damage onto the Magma. This is a fantastic start for the Razors, getting those trio of heads to wipe the Magma off the board, getting the first point here in game 3. This is not looking good for the Blazers, but they do move their Heatran into the active spot. That Rage and Mad Strike does require 2 energy, and if Heatran has taken damage, it will do 80 instead of 40 damage. They send it back over to the Razors, and it's the second Staravia being pulled for the Razors here. The bench Chatot getting its only required energy, and they go again with these Fury attacks. Another heads 2. They get 40 damage onto the Heatran. Now the Heatran though can return 80 damage now to the Chatot. They were trying to maximize their damage. They also get the Rocky Helmet onto the Heatran. They're going to try and make the Razors reluctant to go on the offensive. With this second energy, the Rage and Mad Strike can wipe this Chatot off of the board, turning it nice and crispy before it leaves, tying this game 3 up. Both sides have 1 point. The Blazers are desperately trying to bring this back. They need to maximize their damage here, but the Razors moving that second Chatot into the active spot. They pull their second Staraptor. Still no Starly, but the Wigglytuff does get its second energy, and they go for the Fury attack. They really just need 1 heads. They do get 1. They get 2. They've got another 40 damage onto this Heatran, which puts it into elimination range from this Wigglytuff. That has to be the strategy they were going for, because they know that Chatot cannot outlast a hit from Heatran. And the Blazers pull a Vulpix, so they can utilize one of these 2 Ninetales in their hand. The Vulpix immediately coming online, getting its energy, and the Radiant Mad Strike is going to do 80 damage, taking that Chatot off the board. But that Wigglytuff can move into the active spot and take the Heatran out of this match. However, there is the Rocky Helmet to keep in mind on that Heatran. The Professor's Research is pulled for the Razors. They are going to play that immediately. And they get the Starly finally. They get the second Starly, so they can get both of them onto the bench. But the Blazers only require 1 more energy one more point in this game 3 to lock up game 3 and only lose the series by 1, which will be great for their point count and their damage count. One of the Starly getting a first required energy as well, and there's the Gentle Slap, 50 damage onto the Heatran, wiping it off the board. This is a 1-point game now. The next one will win game 3. Will it be a clean sweep for the Razors? We don't think so, because surely, and they do, the Blazers move the Vulpix into the active spot. They've got the Ninetales in hand. They do pull the Pokemon Center Lady, but that's not their concern. The Ninetales with that Flamethrower does 90 damage, which is powerful enough to take the Wigglytuff off the board, and this will lock up game 3 for this Fire Spit Island deck of the Cinnabar Blazers. As we said, they were trying desperately to bring this one back to maximize their points on the leaderboard, hoping to not drop down too far, as they only drop down to 3rd place, and next round they are going up against the Levere Constrictors, whereas for the Razors, they're back up into 2nd, and next round they are going up against the Pastoria Hydros. But until then, Nidorinas, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.